everyone, welcome to WWULive's Year in Review, using Google Analytics to conduct a year-over-year insight report. My name is Meredith Esquivel, and I'm the digital marketing whaler at Whole Whale, a digital agency that leverages data and tech to increase the impact of nonprofits. I'm joined today by our impact whaler, Laura Clevenger, and our digital analyst whaler, Jack Downs. Thanks both for joining us. A few logistical notes before we start. We will be recording the webinar and sharing the resources after the presentation. So please share any questions you have along the way in the chat. We will be sharing resources there, and we'll leave time at the end for additional Q&A. So with that, I pass the mic over to Jack and Laura.
Great. Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
So today we'll be discussing year-over-year reporting. What is it? We'll look a little closer at our approach at Whole Whale, discuss some key questions when kind of approaching your year-over-year report, and then look at next steps for continuing to analyze the data throughout the year. So why year-over-year reporting? Year-over-year reporting gives you a big picture, offering some important perspective for how each part of your organization impacts overall change online. In understanding your role in the stake you have in your organization's growth is the first step in kind of building a data culture within your own organization. And establishing that responsibility begins to create buy-in. Also, it's important to benchmark. Historical data should inform all of your internal goal setting. And each year you should work to meet or exceed goals that you've set for yourself compared to both industry benchmarks and internal benchmarks. The most important way to gauge internal success is by establishing benchmarks for yourself based on the data that is specific to your organization. So as much as we like open source industry data, really the most important is comparing yourself to your own performance in the previous year. And we like to set a couple standard targets for annual growth with all of our clients. The first being about 20% increase in organic traffic year over year, and then also improved goal conversion rates just generally.
And like Jack said, the 20% increase in organic traffic, that's what we typically see for our own clients and the nonprofits that we work with. However, like he was saying, it's important to look at your own organization's year-over-year growth for organic, for social, for paid, whatever channels that your organization is investing in. And keep that target or benchmark in mind. However, really going off your own growth is the best place to start.
Great. So the Whole Whale approach, we like to take into consideration metrics that measure both quantity and quality. So the how many and the how good, and making sure that we pair both types of metrics in any kind of reporting we do. So an insight that you draw from any kind of data analysis should include both an exact number of how many people are performing a certain action and how good that action or that level of engagement was on the site.
Yeah, so a great example of that would be, let's say you're spending a bunch of time on social in your organization, and you go to do your year-over-year report or your insight report for your organization, and you look like, wow, we really increased our social traffic by 25% compared to 2016. Well, if you're only looking at that, session or user growth, we're not really looking at the engagement of those users. So really looking at, okay, that's great. Let's say you had this huge growth in that area that you were working on, but we also want to see that quality metric next to it to see, were those users engaging? And if you see that, okay, maybe the quality wasn't there, then it's time to dive deeper and figure out how you can improve that quality while keeping the quantity up.
Exactly. So the place that we suggest starting would be a year-over-year comparison of sessions. We view this as your springboard And within this kind of 3,000-foot view of sessions over the last 2 years, you could search for traffic patterns, anomalies, and then use those initial insights as a map for the other kind of deeper analysis that you'll conduct later in your year-over-year analysis. And just as a side note, in presenting this data to maybe your board or with other members of your team, we like to include a little timestamp, or excuse me, a date range, and then highlight what metric that we're comparing on the slide. You could see it right here, sessions, and then we give 2017 over 2016. This just adds clarity. Also, we make a point to annotate any strange anomalies in the data or peaks that we recognize as the consequence of some action we took. So right here, we would annotate something for this bump and look for other seasonal changes, like maybe a depression over the summer months. In addition to kind of the raw graph, we also want to pull these very general numbers. Again, this is just overall changes in traffic. So we're not segmenting, we're not looking at certain traffic channels, we're just looking at overall performance of the site as a starting point.
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to add here is, this is the jumping off point, right? This is the huge overview, and Jack is going to probably not like my analogy of the stinky fridge, but this was something I was thinking about is, analytics and diving into analytics is really like when you open your fridge and you're like, oh man, what is that smell? And you're like, realize something inside is rotten. You don't just throw the whole fridge out, right? You're going to go and look and inspect every single piece of food item in that fridge to figure out what exactly is going on or what the problem item is, what's actually gone rancid. And it's the same thing with analytics. These 30,000-foot views at the beginning can either see like, oh, wow, things are like doing really great and fresh versus like, oh no, something really horrible happened. And instead of just reporting on that like big increase or decrease, it's really, really important to then dive deeper and inspect each of the elements to really understand what caused that change. So having the 30,000-foot view, it's perfect. It's like the canvas setting up the report, and you need to have that canvas there in order to paint the picture. But essentially all the deeper elements, looking into the channels, looking into goals, et cetera, things that we'll talk about in this webinar is the actual painting of the picture and will tell the story that you're trying to conceive to your board or to your team.
Exactly. And I'll just show everyone how we access these the screens that we've displayed here. So we'll go into analytics and we choose overview underneath audience. And here you can adjust your date range, display data points by month, week, day, and then we just take a screenshot of this data and organize them into slides that are consumable and well annotated for the people we share our insight reports with. And this report that you see on the screen is more comprehensive than what we choose, but we try to be selective to pare down the data to exactly what is essential for a given slide. The first thing that we like to look at beyond our 30,000-foot view is who are our users. So recognizing that demographics of your site traffic are not static. In fact, they change quite often and in surprising ways. We track changes in the location of our audience and age, gender, and then Google also provides some interesting guesses at what your users are interested in. We stay away from those and stick more with the measures of demographics that we recognize as more reliable. Laura, sometimes we also will pull lookalike audiences from Facebook ads. Do you want to discuss that?
Yeah, so I can touch on this a little bit. The Facebook ads lookalike is a hack we like to use. And I would only suggest this. Obviously, it's a little bit different than your website audience, but if you have a big enough list, I think at least over a couple thousand, what you can do is pull that email list into your Facebook ad account and pretend like you're creating a lookalike audience. And when you create that audience, it's going to give you tons of really creepy demographic data, like income level, education level, gender, age, etc. That's a little bit more accurate because Facebook is pulling that information from the email connected to a Facebook profile. So it's based what's on that profile. So it's going to be a little bit more accurate than GA's guesses at demographics. GA guesses that information based on your cookie. So it's based on your browser behavior. Google guesses your age and gender. So obviously, if your email list is drastically different than your website audience, those demographics are going to be a bit different. However, if you're an organization that gets a lot of your email signups through your website, and you could segment out those users who signed up from your website in your email, it might be a good idea to pull that into Facebook, and you can get some more accurate demographic data.
So looking at who are our users more closely, again, by demographics, Laura touched on this. Google approximates user gender. So this is their best guess at who is visiting your site. And as I mentioned before, the composition of your audience could change pretty dramatically year over year. Different types of users prefer different types of channels and means of accessing sites. So if you see a certain increase in a specific channel, it may impact the overall demographics of your site in surprising ways. Again, deciding how to include both quality and quantity metrics in your insights. I've included this kind of mock insight below. There were almost 62% increase in male traffic, but females have stronger measures of user engagement. So we know that there were more, the quantity of male users, but that the quality is really on the female side. So again, remembering to bring in both sides of the coin when drawing any kind of insights from the data. We could also look at users by age, as we mentioned. Google creates this nifty little graphic here, and you can see how those are changing year over year. Really, to understand how user behavior varies from age to age, we need to segment users to make that, to understand more closely. When you segment for users maybe 18 to 24, you could then get in and see, okay, what events are they doing differently from overall traffic? Or what pages resonate best with this audience? And we'll look more closely at that process here in a second. But this is just a general screenshot of creating a segment. This is the process I'm sure many of you are familiar with. But you can come in here and create any kind of segment to zero in on a very specific type of user. And then this panel here on the right will give you an overall sense of just how many of your users represent that specific demographic that you are segmenting for. And we'll get back into Google Analytics here to see where we access all of this. So again, underneath the audience view or tab of Google Analytics, we'll go to demographics. You can get an overview here or dive deeper with age and gender. Let this load. So the overview page is where you'll find these nifty little graphics that make for great images to include on your slides or any kind of reports that you share internally. Then you could look closer at age and gender in these two tabs. So this will give you a general sense of how traffic changes by age over the course of a year. And then you could scroll down to this table to see, again, the quantity metrics here and then the quality metrics here as well. So seeing how that maybe varies from age group to age group could provide some interesting insights for you to maybe tailor your content in a certain way or change your strategy in terms of appealing to these certain users. And then segmenting, like I said, we'll do some more segmenting later in this presentation, but just for an idea of what this might look like, we'll segment for users age 18 to 24 who are female. On this right-hand side, it will give me a raw number of how many of those users represent or how many of those users make up the larger part of your traffic. We'll name this real quick. And then we apply this segment. And we can now look at all the other reports within Google analytics through this lens to see if there's any kind of change. And we'll keep this to visit as we move through this deck. Okay, who are our users by location? This is an interesting way to see if you are resonating with new audiences around the world. You may be surprised to learn that you have an international audience, and if that's the case, tailoring any kind of content you create to those international audiences. As I mentioned here, these kinds of insights should inform both your content strategy and also the way you spend money on advertisements, whether it be at social or Google AdWords, recognizing that those strategies change by the location of your users. Laura, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think you said it. Great.
How are users accessing your site? This is a report we'll look at in just a second. But this is a graphic we love because I think it really tells the story. The total number of global mobile users has now surpassed the total number of global desktop users. So it's vital to make sure that your site is mobile friendly and that you are creating content that appears in a very positive way, in a user-friendly way on mobile devices. And you can see how the makeup of user device change from year to year in the device report on Google Analytics. We'll pull it up and get in just a second. But recognizing also that user behavior changes based on device. So as we anticipate, mobile traffic increases, but overall measures of user engagement are much lower than those users who access the site on desktop. And that's not something that should scare you. That's exactly what we expect. Smaller screen gives users fewer opportunities to engage with the site. But optimizing any kind of thing, any kind of strategies you have for your site to meet the demands of those mobile users. And a tool we really like is Google's Mobile Friendly Test. And this is a free service. I'll show you what it looks like, where you could plug in a URL at the top, and then Google will mock up what your site looks like on a mobile device, and then it will list any kind of problems that they see mobile users running into when engaging with your site on a mobile device. So this is a great tool to constantly refer back to make sure that you are mobile friendly and best positioned to capture that increase in mobile users in the next few years. Looking at this report in Google Analytics, we go to, for mobile users, we go to mobile and then search for devices, and this will give us that breakdown between desktop, tablet, and mobile users. And we will take the most important insights. Well, so this will break it down by device category, and then you could do just the more general mobile versus desktop versus tablet in the overview here. And again, we've segmented for 18 to 24-year-old females, so we can see that the majority of them are accessing the site via desktop. And then we could add a segment for, say, all users to see how that changes for how that compares to the overall traffic on the site. So we'll let this load. So we can see here just the raw changes. So compared to the overall users, females 18 to 24 were more likely to log on via desktop device than, like I said, those overall users. So insights like this can inform strategy moving forward. Okay. Next is how are our users reaching our site? So we have an idea of how traffic changed overall, but we want to see exactly where that traffic dipped or peaked over the year. And the best way to do that is to look at traffic changes by channel. So this is in the acquisition tab in overview, and you can get a snapshot of traffic changes by channels. You can see how sessions changed, bounce rate, goal conversion rate. Again, it's that quantity and quality. all in one, making sure that we catch anything out of the ordinary or that's worth celebrating, like a 70% increase in organic sessions, and noting to look closer to see exactly where that happened, what pages drew the most organic users, what kind of keywords, etc.
Yeah, one thing I'll add here, if you look at this image, you'll see oftentimes the quantity metric, when that has increased, the quality metric has decreased. So for example, with that organic, you see, wow, we increased organic sessions by 70% from 2016 to 2017. However, that goal conversion rate decreased by almost 39%. This is obviously a bulk conversion rate, so maybe it was we turned off certain goals or not tracking certain things. But I will say oftentimes when you see the quantity metric go up, you'll see the quantity go down. And that's just because when you're reaching a larger audience, you're essentially tossing out like a basket or a net, a wider net. So you're collecting more things that maybe weren't necessarily exactly related to your cause, or you're reaching an audience that isn't as interested. So oftentimes that quality might go down. And just know that is normal to see that. Obviously, we want to try and limit it as much as possible, but that's pretty common for most organizations, and seeing one go up while the other goes down. And then the same thing works the opposite way. So you see with direct, that overall quantity went down, but the engagement went up. So although there were less users coming directly to the website, they were a more engaged audience.
And to our earlier point about benchmarking against yourself, there could be 70% growth in organic search, but what the most important question to ask is, what does that mean within the context of your own organization? So we've created this sample insight below. So there was a 70% year-over-year increase in organic search last year, but that compares to an even greater 113% increase in the previous 2 years. So understanding why there was a drop-off in overall growth while also celebrating the continued organic growth. So seeing the nuance in the data by tracking performance over the course of many years. And those are insights that you could pull from previous year-over-year reports. So we'll look more closely at organic traffic. So we recommend doing this for each channel that had significant change, looking at that traffic over the course of a few years, and then diving deeper into specific causes for that change. So on this slide, we see organic traffic over 2 years, and we're looking for seasonal patterns and periods of growth. Like in late November, in both 2016 and 2017, we had a peak in traffic, knowing that we can anticipate similar levels of traffic in this upcoming November, and then tailoring content and other things to prepare for that wave of additional sessions in that period. So seeing how your site performs over the course of a year can inform whenever or how you prepare for those expected increases in traffic. One more thing to note about organic traffic and seasonality is that 2 years is really a pretty limited window of time to kind of draw those conclusions. So if you're really wondering if a spike or a drop-off in traffic is seasonal, you want to look at a few more years than just 2. So as far back as your data will allow. Again, we have a general sense of what organic traffic did over the course of the year or 2, but we want to look more specifically at why that happened. So things like looking at organic landing pages and keywords and changes year over year will give clues as to what the drivers were in increasing organic traffic over those periods. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add, looking at the landing page can be especially useful, more so than the keywords, because I'm sure as many of you are the analytics reporters for your organization, you've probably noticed that Google is hiding more and more keywords under not provided. So understanding instead by where users are going and what they might be looking for by looking at the landing page is kind of a good way to get around that, because although we may not have the exact keyword they were searching for, by the landing page topic you have an idea of what those keywords might be.
Exactly. And then the acquisition all traffic channels report, you can choose a channel and then look at certain metrics or performance by landing page keyword from there. So we're in the organic channel, change in traffic by landing page report. And I've kept this segment here so you can see how, again, the organic report by landing page and then keyword. You could look at source. So that would be the different kind of search engines. And again, you could do this for each of your overall channel groups. So we were just looking specifically at organic traffic, but if you go back to this channels report, you could see change for organic, direct, social, referral, and then dive deeper into each of those channels within those specific reports. So back to our deck. How do users behave when they arrive on our site? So where are users going? What actions are they taking? And again, it's critical to segment to look at how those patterns change based on different groups of users, whether that be the type of channel or the source that they sent to, that sent those users to the site, or demographic differences or pages that they've read or landed on. So looking for different things that set user groups apart, and then searching for differences and takeaways through segmentation. So where did our users go? We like the content drill down report in the behavior tab. We'll get into it in a minute, but you could see how content performed based on overall categories. So whether it be your tips articles or your FAQs or your about pages, how did overall volume and quality of traffic to those pages change year over year. You could also see your landing pages, which, as we'll touch on a little later, these are your front doors, so how people usually access your site, where they land. And you could draw some great insights from bounce rate and user engagement with those pages into how users are engaging with the content you provide and what content is resonating best. So this is that content drill down report. Again, we could see how user traffic and engagement varied by overall category. That's that page path. So we have our tips articles coming in at the very top, and then the homepage at number 2. You may be surprised at how little of your traffic lands on your homepage. For us, it's just about 5%, down from 9% in the previous year. So optimizing your content to drive users elsewhere on the site is important. And again, we have the volume, but also the quality metrics that we've highlighted in green. So how long are users staying on your pages? How often are they bouncing? That's how often they leave the page without taking any meaningful action. And how often are they exiting? So an exit is different from a bounce. An exit is the page at the end of a session. So what pages are driving users to say, okay, I'm done. I'm satisfied. I'm exiting out of the site. So both of those are important to gauge. And then, like we said, segment to see differences between major groups of users. And then again, what specific actions are users taking? So not only page views, but also events that they trigger, and then goals that they convert. So one nuance here is that we value change in goal conversion rate over goal completions. Raw number of goal completions should increase if your traffic is increasing, more users, more completions. Also, if you configure new goals, that will inflate the number of overall goal completions. But the goal conversion rate will control for some of those variables and give you a more accurate sense of how user engagement is changing year over year. Something with goal analysis to consider is when that goal was configured. So we see here in the upper right-hand corner, this goal that we configured sometime in late 2016. And Google says, oh, wow, you had a 430% increase in conversions for this specific goal year over year. That's great. Well, we know that that doesn't tell the full story, since there was such a shorter period of time in 2016 for users to convert this specific goal. So if we wanted to get a sense of how this goal performed year over year, we might limit the date range and compare those last 3 months of 2016 to the last 3 months of 2017 to see differences in user engagement.
And just to take a step back, goals, as a reminder, are not automatically set up in Google Analytics. They require custom configuration, and they should be the most important actions that a user can take on your website. So whether that's signing up for a program or for an email or downloading an important resource, having those goals set up in Google Analytics is really going to allow you to get the most out of it, because we really, we want to be measuring those key actions. And one cool thing is, once you have the goals set up in Google Analytics, you then can see goals in other reports in Google Analytics besides just the conversion tab. So like you've seen when Jack has been going through Analytics, when you're looking at, for example, the landing pages report in Google Analytics, once you have the goals set up, you can see those in that report and compare different landing pages, not only by average time on page or bounce rate engagement goals, but by the ultimate engagement metric, which is the goals. So having those set up is number one priority for Google Analytics if you don't have them already.
Exactly. And this is the goals report page. So we've looked at the audience tab, acquisition, behavior for that content. But conversions is, to Laura's point, the best sense of true user engagement with your most important aspects on your site. And you can access this view of your goals here within the conversions tab under the goals overview. And we've kept this 18 to 24-year-old females segment here. So you can see overall changes in goal completions, both for goals in total, and then also for each goal specifically. And then underneath, you see that change for that specific segmented audience. And then there's also some great reports here, like the reverse goal path or the funnel visualization that will help you see the paths that users take before converting these goals. Okay. Within that goals report, at the bottom, you could see goal conversions by source medium, and this could again be for goals in aggregate or for very specific goals that you toggle between on the goals overview page. And so we see here that Google organic search sent the most users who ended up converting goals. That's great. We note a change, year-over-year change in the raw volume of goals completed from organic users. And then compare it to changes in direct traffic and in our email list. And then use those insights to tailor the funnels that we create for our users to complete key actions like an email sign up or reading a certain page or resource on our site. Another way to look more closely at goal conversions by age group or source or landing page would be in custom reports in Google Analytics. That's underneath the customization tab, and you could create reports that combine really any kind of dimensions and metrics and look more closely. Export that information, save it, and track it over time. Okay, so our key questions. So we've given you a general idea of how to approach data analysis, but these are 3 questions that we think are the most important to really get to the bottom of when constructing your year-over-year report. So the first would be, where are our most engaged users coming from? So looking at either your source mediums or your channels to decide which users send or which channels send the most engaged users. So we decide that a user is engaged by goal conversion rate. How often are they bouncing? How many pages are they visiting each session? And how long are they spending on the site for each visit? So if we are in the channels report looking at engagement by channel, or if we're looking at engagement by specific sources, we might draw the insight that, oh, look, the Facebook users have the highest donation goal conversion rate. So they are donating at a higher rate than any other user. we should consider boosting Facebook using ad spend to capitalize on this level of engagement. So making our the insights we draw from the data actionable and deciding or brainstorming ways to capitalize on user engagement we see or to improve negative changes in user engagement or overall traffic volume in other areas. The next is where is our front door? So within that content drill down report, looking at landing pages specifically for organic users and determining how users are first engaging with your site. Again, it may not always be our homepage. So recognizing that maybe a certain resources page ranks highly for a keyword that draws in a lot of users. We may see that because the majority of organic users land on the frequently asked questions page, we should optimize that page to drive those users to convert more goals. So maybe including calls to action on this page or changing something as simple as the color scheme to drive users to visit more pages on the site or take more specific actions like maybe signing up for an email. The last would be, what are our top goal conversion paths? So again, within that conversions tab, looking at those extra functions like goal flow and steps to goal conversions to see exactly how users are moving through your site towards the goal completion point. So an insight we may draw from analysis like this would be users who sign up for emails usually spend time on the resources pages first. So how can we leverage those resources pages, or how can we change those resources pages to increase the number of email conversions? So again, A/B testing, changing maybe the copy or the steps in the completion funnel to increase the overall number of conversions on those pages. So something that's, we have proven success with these pages, how can we make it even better? And benchmarking that year-over-year performance to your year-over-year improvement in the previous years. So again, internal benchmarking and constantly improving, constantly optimizing, constantly changing to draw in the most engaged users you can. So now what? Rooting your organization in data. Creating a year-over-year report really is, as we mentioned, the best way to generate a sense of accountability and remind everyone in your organization that they play a part in overall growth. So making sure that you share this data with your team to reinforce that idea, making insight reporting a priority, and always asking both questions that you're tackling and encouraging others to ask, what did the data say? So constantly referring back to Google Analytics to see if any of those insights or any of those changes that you made based on those insights are changing throughout the year.
Yeah, and although this is technically year-over-year reporting, you could follow a similar format for monthly reporting, for example. So whatever time frame works for your organization, we usually like monthly, making sure that that data is clearly communicated on whatever that regular basis is, whether it's monthly, quarterly, whatever. Although we definitely suggest monthly.
Right, and the level of specificity that you can use in your reporting is much higher for monthly and quarterly reports. You could outline key objectives for those smaller periods of time and then tailor your reporting to answer specific questions around those goals for, say, a quarter or a month. Speaking of goals, year-over-year reporting is the perfect time to assess your goals, the key actions that users take on your site, and establish a funnel of engagement for your organization that you then use to map out goals and events and other kind of actions to track within Google Analytics. So ask yourself, how can GA be better tailored to capture the most important data? And we have this funnel that begins with awareness. So this may be something like total sessions or organic sessions, just a general idea of how many users are visiting your site and are learning about your organization. The next step would be interested goals. So this would be some kind of act that indicates that users are committed to learning more about your organization. So this could be an email sign up, or someone shares one of your articles on a social platform. The next level would be engaged. So these are users who have taken a meaningful action on your site. So maybe a very important goal of yours, like a donation, or watching, or like creating some kind of content to share on your site. And then these 3 tiers of goals and behaviors then inform kind of this final piece, which is overall change or meaningful change for your organization offline. So that could be number of dollars raised, or it could be number of lives saved, or meaningful change based on your own initiative. And we track kind of that change based on increases in users in the above tiers. And then keep analyzing your data. Like Laura said, schedule month over month reports if you can. If not, quarter over quarter is absolutely necessary. And then go granular by tailoring these reports to those very specific items for that frame of time. And then make this data accessible by configuring things like Data Studio reports or dashboards to share with your team, so that they don't have to do much heavy lifting to understand the important takeaways from the analysis that you're doing. So we could look at what this Google Data Studio report looks like. This is Whole Whale's nonprofit template for Data Studio. Very easily customized for your own organization. And it just presents the same kind of data you may pull from Google Analytics in a very clean, accessible way. Just like this, outlined by kind of an overview. And then we look at audience. This is kind of that demographic page, AdWords performance, and so on, SEO. And this is something that we will include with the resources at the end of this presentation for you to use and download for your own organization. And I think that's it. Laura, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
No, I think that is it. Meredith, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. We have a lot of great questions. So thanks all for sending them in, and feel free to send in more if you have them. To start us off, going back to the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned annotations. So what kind of things would you recommend annotating, both in a report and within Google Analytics?
Sure. So annotations are internal notes for all of your team members to see why exactly dramatic changes in traffic occurred. I'll pull up our own annotations here, and we can get an idea of what kind of things we may note. But it could be something as simple as a goal was configured, and that's why we see an increase in goal completions, or an article that really took off was published on this date, and that's why there was an increase of traffic at this point in time. Or it could be something like an organization, a high-profile organization like the New York Times linked to one of our stories, and this is why there's an increase in traffic here. Or it could be something like, oh, spam. There was spam on our website that brought in an increase in sessions that aren't truly engaged users. So we want to know that we should exclude those kinds of those sessions when doing year-over-year reporting. So this is something like we messed up something that we set up for our own website. We make a note here because it impacts our own internal traffic. Or we know that on Giving Tuesday each year, we have an increased number of sessions to our site in the week leading up. So we'll make an annotation to note that this is Giving Tuesday. This spike every year is something that we should anticipate.
So to put it simply, it's really any major increase or decrease in traffic based on something that you look at and has already happened, or a new configuration that you assume is going to have an increase or decrease. Just so when someone comes in, they know what happened.
Cool. Moving on to the next question. When looking at location demographics, why would a city have not set under it?
Yeah, that sometimes happens if Google Analytics can't figure out where your IP address is coming from. So it just, for some reason, based on your IP, it can't pull in that information. That's pretty much it.
Are there any gotchas on setting goals that we should know about? And if so, do you have any suggested resources or places to look for guidance on those gotchas? Besides Whale's website, of course.
Yeah, I would say we have a few resources on our website specific to goal setup for a nonprofit. It's different for every organization. I wouldn't say there's one universal goal that every nonprofit should have. It's really tailored to what the key actions are for your organization based on the impact you're trying to have. I would say one kind of mostly universal one, which I would think would mostly be for every organization, is email sign up, just because that email capture is really giving your organization permission to continue to engage and build that relationship with the user. So they eventually may engage in a program or give you a donation down the line. But having that email capture so you can communicate with them and continue to build the relationship is key. So that is probably the most universal goal, I would say. And then obviously, if you're tracking or capturing donations on your website, asking for monetary donations, that's also a great one to have set up. And we have both of those kind of outlined in a article on the Whale website, so we can link to that in the resources as well.
One other thing I'd add is that if you have a lot of ideas for your goals, recognizing that you only have 20 goals allowed for each Google Analytics view. So choosing the most important and recognizing that if there's a simple goal to maybe a certain page on your site, that you could find that information by looking for it in another report. So configuring things like email configurations, donations, like the most vital actions users could take, prioritizing those when configuring your goals.
So 2 questions for walkthroughs while we're in GA. Could you walk through the funnel visualization under conversions and goals and explain a little bit more about what that information means and what to look for there? And then can you do the same with the behavior flow page?
Sure. So goal flow is a report we like. Again, it's more useful if you choose a specific goal to use the tool for, rather than kind of a sweeping look at how all goals are converted. So right here, you could toggle between the goals that you'd like to see the goal flow for. We have our email goal sign up set up specifically right now, and you could see kind of by size the volume of users as they move through the goal conversion process. So 1,500 users visited through Google or arrived at our site through Google organic search. And then this many, you could like highlight this pathway to the thank you page and see exactly how many users arrived on thank you first. And then from there, how many moved on to the final email conversion. These red drop-off periods here too represent the number of users you lost at that step.
So I'll pop in and say too, this actually this isn't the best example because we don't really have a funnel set up for this goal. It's just taking you right to the thank you. But Jack, if you go into the goal configuration setup, I'm not sure if we have any funnels. This is that funnel report in GA is really only useful if you have a very specific steps before that final conversion that a user is going to take. So for example, if you have a online store for your organization and someone goes through the add to cart, cart checkout, cart payment, etc., they're going through those different steps. Then when you set the goal, like just click on anyone for an example, Jack, you can set up those different steps as a funnel when you're setting up the goal. So like here you see the funnel, you would turn it on, add each of those pages as a step. And then in that funnel report, you can see the drop off through each of those steps. So if you have, it's a great way to see if you have a leaky bucket, if you're bringing people into to that online store, but they're not actually completing the purchase. With nonprofits, it's usually not as useful in certain situations because it's either just like a resource download or a program sign up. And if there's not multiple pages that every user is taking before they reach that final conversion, it might not be as useful. So it's really only useful if you have very specific steps before that final goal that a user is going to take so you can understand where they're dropping off.
Another report I'd say would be the reverse goal path. This organizes steps by in a table. Again, email isn't the best one for us to use as an example. We could do this. Again, you want to be specific with what goals you're analyzing in these reports. But this will give the total number of users who have completed a goal based on the series of steps outlined in this table. So it could give you an idea of how frequently users are completing a goal that you've configured based on steps 1 through 3. And if you see not set here, it's because users entered at a later step. So for example, on line 4, users entered and then immediately converted the goal on this step. And that represented 118 goal conversions for that year. So this could also be a useful report.
Cool. I know we only have 6 minutes left. So how many other questions do we have, Meredith?
We have 3 that I think would be good ones to talk about. So unless you have other notes here, we can also send some resources if people want to dive deeper.
Yeah, we can send some more resources on these specific funnel reports so people can dive into them more on their own time.
Yeah. Can you touch on the behavior flow as well? And while you're there and while you're pulling it up, also how is Google Analytics useful beyond looking at content? So is it just useful to inform the content to create for your audience, or does it have other fundamental uses?
Yeah, it's extremely useful for content. Obviously, that's the main point of your website, is to have information content on there so your audience can engage with you in a more meaningful way so you can have that impact you're trying to have as an organization. So really understanding, one, what type of content, what type of information is your audience taking advantage of, and then 2, it can be helpful too just to understand who your audience is if you don't know, based on some of the things we already talked about, like demographics, and then also understanding where your audience is coming from so you can actually capitalize on those channels outside of your website. So if it's, you have really good partnerships and you have a lot of referrals coming in, capitalizing on those relationships, or if it's social, is bringing in a lot of engaged users, well, then you need to spend time on your social media. So getting an understanding of where those engaged users come, and then also, once you have them there, what the most engaging content is and what type of content you should continue creating. So I would say those are 2 huge things.
Yeah, and then for behavior flow, the behavior flow report, I'd say this is similar to the goal flow report that we touched on a little earlier. Instead of a specific funnel for a goal completion, though, this just kind of looks at common paths that users move through on your site. So we don't reference this report that often. We think that looking at reports that look at channels and how users perform on specific pages rather than as they move from one step to the next is more useful.
Yeah, this report is just so ugly. Google really needs to update it. It's just so confusing and so unhelpful. Looking instead at like maybe the reversible path like Jack showed, or creating a segment for like users like we've talked about, and looking at what pages they've gone to is probably more helpful than looking at this confusing report.
Yep. So for example, if you wanted to see like how many users visited this specific page and then where they went next, the more the cleaner way to approach that question would be to segment for users who landed on this page, and then look in other reports to draw other insights about those specific users.
Cool. Okay. Two quick questions to close us out. Can you touch on some more uses for Data Studio, how we use it, how we recommend our clients use it, etc.?
Yeah, Data Studio is just really best for reporting, honestly. And I would say reporting to people who in your organization aren't as familiar with the data or aren't as in it day to day, just because you can present it in a more beautiful manner. So it's a little less confusing to look at. Personally, as someone who's in Google Analytics quite often for our clients, I don't use Data Studio as much because I'm just in the data day to day and like looking at dashboards, and there are obviously pros and cons between Data Studio and dashboards. With the dashboard right in Google Analytics, you can then click on it and it sends you directly to the report, or click on the widget that you're looking at and it'll send you directly to the report in GA. However, in a Data Studio report, you don't have that feature. So yeah, Jack will show you like just click on any of these. Yeah, I feel like, I'm interested in the total traffic and bounce rate by device. Oh, how that's changed. He can click on this widget if we've linked to it, and it'll send me directly to that report in GA, which is really nice if you're in the data day to day and that's your main job. However, if you need to show the data to someone else, having a beautiful format in Data Studio is really useful. And you can just share that link with anyone, and people can view it. So it's really easy to share as well.
Yeah, I think that dashboards are more accessible than configuring a Data Studio report. They're quite easy. You just configure widgets with the metrics you'd want to record, and then they can be scheduled for email. So they will automatically be sent to members of your team who opt in to receiving that information on either a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. You have total control over the frequency. And then again, as Laura touched on, you can link to other reports on Google Analytics. So it tailors the experience to a specific member of your organization's need. Also, we have a dashboard bundle on Google's Gallery or Solutions Gallery that you could download. And it is a package of 6 dashboards that you could start scheduling out for email and using in your own internal reporting. And we'll link to that also in the resources.
Awesome. Okay, one quick question, just because we're getting a lot of awesome ones still coming in, which we will send resources for. But just to close this out, how much time do you recommend committing to tracking this data on a monthly basis?
It's hard to say. I think the amount of time you spend in the analytics should reflect certain initiatives or how busy you are in a given period of the year. Obviously, if you are launching a robust social media campaign, making sure that you're regularly checking to see how it's performing. If just kind of a benchmark for standard check-in on the data, I'd say once or twice a week, delegating 1 or 2 people within your team to kind of carry that mantle and look at just broad changes. If they notice any kind of anomalies or things that raise eyebrows, then looking more closely. To our point about dashboards, it could kind of simplify that process, outlining the most important metrics and checking on those pretty regularly, and making sure that the onus is on someone very specific in your team, to make sure that keeps happening over the course of the year.
Yeah, I definitely second Jack there, using the dashboard as the automated monthly dashboard as a jumping off point, so you can dive into anything deeper that looks suspicious. Also, you kind of touched on just checking in on the account. At Howell, we do something bi-weekly called a fire check, where we just go into all of our client accounts and just look at all of kind of the main reports, and have a certain systematic way of going through each account to make sure everything like looks okay, or to check anything that may have like really jumped up or really decreased, or if spam's coming in, or whatever it may be. And that takes like 30 minutes per account every couple weeks. So doing something like that could be useful too.